Please pray with me. Spirit of wisdom, of encouragement and challenge, minister to us, your people, we pray. May only truth be spoken, may only truth be heard. Amen. I just love it that the editors who thousands of years ago put the Torah into its order chose this passage to be the very beginning of our spiritual and religious literature. A song, a celebration for the goodness of the world. In the beginning, God was creating the heavens and the earth. The earth was a formless void, a hole of blackness. God's Spirit brooded like a mother bird above the dark abyss. Light and light appeared. And day one of a cosmic new beginning, God saw that it was good. We can get looking at the negatives. They're sure around us today, coming through the news. And we can lose sight of the fact of how good life is. I read a story the other day. This woman went into a convent, and it was a convent of silence. And so she met with the Mother Superior, and the Mother Superior said, there'll be no talking, and then after 5 years I'll check in with you. So 5 years passed, and so the Mother Superior met with this nun and said, you have 2 words you can share. And she said, room cold. And so Mother Superior says, well, we'll see what we can do about that. And we'll check in with you in another 5 years. So another 5 years came, and they met together, and Mother Superior said, you can speak 2 words. Food bad. So Mother Superior says, well, we'll see what we can do about that. And we'll speak to you in another 5 years. So 5 years passed, and they met again, and Mother Superior said, I'm listening now for your 2 words. And she said, I quit. And Mother Superior says, well, that's probably best because you've been complaining ever since you got here. So our spirituality and our religion begins with a song of thanksgiving by God for the goodness of creation. Isn't it great that the very first image of God is not a sober God, not a stern God, not a lecturing God, not a judgmental God, but a God that's saying it's all good. Because friends, we're a part of that. You're all good. How does that feel? A little weird, eh? Take it from the Bible. Church has placed a lot of rules and duty in the place of joy and love sometimes. We sometimes just are too uptight in church. I often say we know how to run our families to where we're responsible, but we have a good time. We go in a church building, we all go weird. One of my favorite stories is, I don't know whether I was married or going out with Sue, but her mother was the head of the UCW at her church, and they hosted the Presbyterial where like 150 seniors came from all over the area. They had doctors there talking about seniors' issues. They had dietitians, they had exercise, they had the whole thing of workshops, and then they had the closing worship. And me being her son-in-law, or future son-in-law, she asked me to do the theme address. And so I said how much I'd appreciated this and that it's wonderful, all the different workshops, and that there was a real sense of joy and how great it is to be able to laugh and have a good time. And I said, I was thinking, it reminds me of a story of out in 40 Highway, there's Fred and Bertha, our farmers, and they were out weeding the garden. And Bertha was bent over weeding, and Fred was just kind of looking at her, and he forgot to screen what he was thinking. And he said, Bertha, you got a backside on you the size of a combine. And she didn't even dignify his remarks with a response. But that night, when they got into bed, Fred was feeling a little frisky. And she just turned over, looked him in the eye. She says, "You think I'm turning on this $500,000 piece of equipment for half a cob of corn? You're crazy." Now, for some reason, my mother-in-law was not happy about that. And she came up to me and said, "Paul, why would you tell a story like that?" And I said, "Well, Myrtle," I said, "I wanted to make sure it was appropriate." So I checked with one of the senior leaders in the church, and he said it was just fine. And she said, "Well, who was that?" I said, "Your husband, Fred." But I want us to embrace, friends, and the world needs us to embrace, that pleasure is a part of the good life. Pleasure and laughter and having a good time, that's the oil in the engine of duty. If we don't put oil in our cars, right, it's just a matter of time that engine's going to seize up. So let's keep this place well lubricated, eh? Absolutely. Lots of joy and having good times. God saw that it was good because our tradition is one that's very different. There's a picture at the seminary I went to, Atlanta School of Theology, and it was from the late 1800s. And it was a skater clad in black with a top hat, the coat cut long, black knickers, black stockings, and a white cravat at the throat. And this picture caught him in mid-glide on the ice. And it was Reverend Robert Walker. And what he was doing, he was skating from one of his churches in the winter to the church on the other side of the water. And it was so much faster than trying to take the horse around the water. But when the Presbyterian elders heard that he was skating on Sunday to this other point, they held an emergency meeting. And they said, "Sir, is it true that you skated on the Sabbath to the point across the water?" And he says, "Aye," but he says, "I didn't enjoy it." So we can lose touch with the beauty and only remember the duty. And so while we do ask those questions, how are my decisions this week? How are my givings to charity? Have I been caring and loving? We've also got to ask the question too, am I enjoying it? Am I enjoying it? And let me throw something out. I always thought it was strange, when I do workshops or when I went to Trinity, I asked the council, "How many of you social drink?" Most of them put up their hands. And they said, "Well, when's the last time you had a drink in church?" "Well, I never had a drink in church," right? And I said, that's the kind of stuff that just drives people crazy, right? Hypocrisy. It's one of the great judgments of the church. And so why can't we have social drinking in the church? So they took a couple years of study. First they had to see whether they could, and the United Church begrudgingly said, "Oh, yes, you can." And then they checked the insurance. Yeah, that's all right. And then they discovered, if they make their own wine and beer, they can actually have it at receptions and different things, and you don't even have to get a liquor license. And if there's a prayer and that sort of thing. So anyway, they now make their own wine. They've got a red label and a white label and have it at events. So that's something for you to look into. I mean, service clubs can have a drink. The Anglicans can. The Roman Catholics. Surely we can too, eh? So just something to think about there. So when you think about it, to me, I've always thought it's harder for me to get my head around there being no higher power than there being a God. It just, the odds of everything being the way they are without some kind of guiding force are just beyond my ability to conceive. And then part of that is, like, if evolution was just based on necessity, why is there such beauty in the world? I mean, the sun doesn't just shut off at night, right? We're treated to an infinite variety of colors and hues every time the sun goes down. Now, I'm told it's similar when the sun goes up. I just don't see that. But think of the pleasures of touch, right? And I just love stroking my cat. Don't know if the cat likes it so much, but I really enjoy it. And then sitting on a beach on a hot summer's day and digging your toes in the sand. The sound of birds in the morning, toe-tapping fiddle music, the aroma of fresh apple pie coming from your house. These are all beautiful things. The world is constructed with beauty at every level and way. And so, small wonder the ancients wrote this hymn of praise and placed it first in the Torah, in the Bible, and God saw that it was good. I read a story a few years ago that really had an impact on me. It resonated. And it was about a refugee camp in Honduras. And there was an American aid worker who was over there to help out for 3 months, a young adult who thought that would be a good thing to do, which of course it was. But she just couldn't imagine the poverty. She couldn't imagine how awful everything seemed to her compared to her life back in the States. And she went up to one of the leaders and said, how can you put up with this? How can you stand this? And the leader said, well, we don't have a choice. We don't get to go home like you do. And so she said, that's why whenever we set up a refugee camp, we set up 3 committees. The property committee to oversee all the getting the tents up and maintaining them, and an education committee for our children, and then a committee de allegro, committee of joy, so that we can have fun events and have a good time. Because if we don't do that, then we'd get too depressed. And so we do have a good time. You know, I just remember, Sue, the story when you came back from some country where there was abject poverty, and the kids would come out and be just dancing and having a great time with nothing. And we saw that in Cuba too. So joy is how people under struggle and stress maintain their joy and maintain their hope. So help us to never forget that we are created for goodness, and to realize that God's view of things is that despite the problems, despite the fact that the reign of God is not fully realized and evolved, life is good. We are good. So could we just say that together? Life is good. Life is good. We are good. One more time. Life is good. We are good. Let's claim that, my friends. Let's keep going deeper. Take joy seriously. Enjoy your new minister and one another. And let us say with God, it is good. It is good. It's all good.